Wonderful. Thank you so much, Felicia. Welcome, Beady friends. My name is Meredith Roddy, and I am with Beadalon and Artistic Wire. And this is another wonderful class for the Michaels Community Classroom. So if you are joining me live, welcome. I see lots of familiar names over here in the chat, and I appreciate everybody hanging out with me today. If you are catching me on the replay, you have found the Michaels YouTube channel, which has so many amazing tutorials, and they're all for free, which is fantastic. I know I have learned a lot from all of the classes that all of the makers have made, and I hope that you have as well. So today's project, we are going to be making a wine doily, or a wine cozy, as I like to call it. Excuse me. We are going to be using the netted stitch, or the netting stitch. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that stitch, about all of the different variations and ways that you can make it look. We're going to talk about stringing material. We are going to talk a lot about seed beads, and we're going to have some fun. It's a party down here in the office, and you'll see in just a moment when Felicia takes my overhead camera. It's getting a little crazy down over here in the home office. So hopefully we will all have fun today. Just as a reminder, this class is being recorded. And if you do have any questions, go ahead and write those down in the chat. Either I or Yvette, who is also here from Beadalon, she's monitoring all of the comments, and hopefully we'll be able to get the answers that you need. So that's it for me for the uphand, or the forward facing camera. Let's go ahead and show what we're making today. So I did not lie. We are having a party down here in the beading studio, because what we are making is a perfect hostess gift. So the middle wine bottle here has the finished project here. And it is a wine cozy, a wine doily, and it's made in netted stitch. And it is deceptive. And I know I say this a lot when I'm teaching classes, but it really is deceptively simple, because all it is a pattern, right? It's a lot of beadwork, and it is more than we have time for today, but I'm going to get you started, and I'm going to get you finished. And then the middle part will be up to you. And you can see on here my colorway. I actually have a color variation. I started off with gold bugle beads and red Superduos. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then I changed it at the bottom to red bugles and gold Superduos. And you can do any variation. You can do each diamond differently. You can do whatever colors suit your fancy. And we're actually going to be working in a different colorway today, rather than the gold and the red and the white that I have here on our finished project. We are going to be working in a blue, silver, and white color palette. And this one I have started because, like I said, we're going to have to do a little bit of a cooking show kind of a style, but I'm going to get you started and send you on your way. And I think you'll really, really enjoy this project. So Felicia, if you wouldn't mind, if you could take the forward camera just one last time. I want to get reset down here in the studio so that I can bring in all of the materials that we are going to be using for our class today. So I just want to set all of this aside and get everything back replaced. So let's see. Just looking to see everybody in the comments. Welcome. And let me get this camera reset, and we should be good to go. All righty. That was a lot better than seeing all the jostling and the moving parts going around. So I mentioned that what we're doing for our project today, let me just bring this right in right here so you can see it a little bit closer. This is a netted stitch. And if you took a project that I did last year with a netted ornament, this might look a little familiar because it is a very similar design. And that's what I love about this stitch. It is so versatile and so changeable to so many different design opportunities. For example, and you might think, why is that crazy necklace down here? Well, I wanted to bring this out and show it, first of all, because it's my favorite go-to show-off necklace, but this is the exact same stitch that I used for the wine bottle. So it doesn't look anything the same, right? But this is also netted stitch. So just to put a little spark in your creative brain, that the different stitches, when built differently, when used with different types of beads, can really work up completely differently. So the materials that we're going to be using for this particular project today, which of course is our wine doily, our wine cozy, we are going to be using WildFire for our base material. And I have, I brought out, let's see, I have black to work with today. If I were to make this project not demonstrating it, I might use a different color than black. I might use the green color or the white color to blend in a little bit differently or a little bit better with the color of beads that I am using. However, since I am teaching and I want you all to be able to see my thread path, we'll be using black today. So if it's a little jarring in terms of your design aesthetic, please don't be jarred. Just know that I'm using it so that we can all see what we're doing. So this is the stringing material. That's all you need for stringing material for our project today. Now, my preferred needle to use to do this kind of stitching is the jewel loom needle. Now, this needle is available in Michael's stores. I have found that it is not currently listed online. So if you're looking for it online, you might not be able to find it. And I do apologize for that. We're trying to work with Michael's to rectify that situation. But it is, I have seen this in my local Michael's store. So I do know it is a product that Michael's carries, but for whatever reason, unfortunately, currently it is not findable on the website. But the thing that I really like about these jewel loom needles, and you can see when I bring a kind of a standard size needle next to it, is they're really long. And what that does is it allows for more surface area to string up your design. So particularly when we get to the fringy part of the design, it is a lot easier to do the fringe when you can put practically all of these beads onto the needle. So if you don't have the jewel loom needle, that is, let's see, this is 8 centimeters or 3.125 inches long. If your needle is a little shorter, that will work, no problem. I teach this class with the longer needles because it's easier to show, and it is my suggestion for what to use to do this kind of long netting and this long fringe. So not a lot of supplies for this project today. You will of course need scissors, right? We always need scissors when we're working with threading material. And I also like to use a cord cutter whenever I am using WildFire. It just helps to trim and seal my knots really, really well. So there's a cord cutter in Michael's as well that you'll be able to find to do that. Now let's get to the beads, right? The part that makes the project. Although at Beadalon, we think that the stringing materials and the wire are what make the project the project. So I have from my wonderful friends at John Bead, we had a great conversation this morning, and I see Danielle here in the chat or in the window as well. She popped up first, so she's actually one of the few people that I can see in my window. So hello, Danielle. I am using Superduos, and I love a project where I get to use Superduos. These are some of my favorite seed beads to work with. They're so versatile. They're so creative. And Danielle, if you haven't checked out the John Bead classes for the Michael's Community Classroom yet, I highly, highly recommend checking them out. Danielle's a fantastic teacher, and I love what she does with these beads. She turns them, she uses her magic to turn them into absolutely beautiful projects. So I'll be using the Superduos today. I've chosen silver metallic matte as my color, which is different than the color that I used in my example for the class, but same bead, just different colorway. Then we're going to need some bugle beads. And here I chose for my first color, aqua. And I had originally thought that I would work up my example with the 2 colors. So I chose this one says black, but it's not black. These are in the wrong container. But the crystal color, that's funny that I put them back in the wrong container. That happens sometimes. But when I started making my example, I only used one color. And then also for my third seed beads, we're going to be using size 8s. So let's see, these are white. I'm not sure that these are actually white though, because they have kind of a frost to them. One of the things that happens when I end up making a lot of projects and doing a lot of different things is sometimes things go back into the wrong tube. So I apologize if that is the wrong color. Danielle might be able to put that into the comments and let me know what the actual color is. And then for the fringe part, I used one of the cards that has the four different sizes of the Rondel crystals on them. I know Sarah Lovecraft uses these a lot in her projects, and they're perfect because, as you can see, I have one left on the card here, but they come with four different sizes of the same color, and they're so perfect for doing this kind of project. And you can see I have these cute little storage containers that come in a nice tray from Michael's that I've been using to store my leftover beads. And they're the perfect little storage containers. So that's what we need today. We need a couple different sizes of rondelles. We need some seed beads and some stringy material, and we're ready to get started. So it looks like my beauty friends are here with me in the comments. And again, if there's something that I go over too quickly or a question that you have, just shoot it right there and I will do my very best to see it as it goes by. Now, one of the things that I've noticed about myself and instructors in general is we don't like to give specific measurements for things. And boy, is that frustrating when you're trying to learn a new technique. But when you're doing seed beading, what you really want to be doing is working with a comfortable length of thread. So what is a comfortable length of thread? For me, it's a wingspan, which is about 5 to 6 feet. So I pull out from my spool 5 to 6 feet. I just measure it with my arms. Now, the reason why I don't go longer is there are a couple of different reasons for that. But the first is something that you want to avoid, which is called the beater's backstroke. And that's what happens when you keep having to pull back, pull back, pull back every time you do a stitch. And not only is it hard on your arms and on your joints, but it also lends to it makes it a lot more likely that your thread is going to tangle, that your thread is going to perhaps knot, and just be much more frustrating to work with. It's actually less frustrating to have to add more thread than it is to have to untangle thread. I know that from personal experience, and I'm sure that Danielle can vouch for that also. And it's so funny, whenever I open up packaging, I tend to do it like I do holiday presents, and I try to like preserve the packaging and not just rip it apart. I don't know why I do that. It always takes longer than it needs to, and I end up destroying it anyway. So the WildFire thread that I'm using today is my favorite go-to, and I always use bead weaving thread. And the reason why is because it is super strong. It doesn't stretch. You don't need to condition it. It's waterproof, and it is very difficult to pierce it with a needle. It is thermally bonded, so it has a coating on top of it. And it's the perfect in between thread and fishing line, if those two descriptors make sense. So it's not too stiff, but it's also not too slippery and flimsy. So it's the perfect temper, the perfect drape, the perfect everything, in my opinion, to do seed bead work. And you can see when I threaded that needle, all I did is I used my pliers, I smashed the end, and then I just threaded it right through that needle. Now, if threading needles gives you the willies, try using a big eye beading needle. Those are available in Michael's as well. And they make it much easier to get that thread through the needle. I find that the dual loom needle really does work the best for me for this project, or else I might consider using one of the longer big eye beading needles. So what I like to do is I like to make little piles on my bead station here. And I'm noticing now that this white, that is not going to be great for seeing. So I'm going to move that out of the way. And I'm actually going to bring in, I have got some silver beads here. And I think that that's just going to be a better contrast for showing. It's one of the things, teaching colors can sometimes be different than using colors. Okay, so I think we're ready to get started. So the instruction sheet that was included when you signed up for the class goes over the different bead counts. So when you're working with a netted stitch, whether it be here in the round, really airy like this, or if it's nice and tight like this one is here, all we're doing is repeating the count all the way around and then doing the, let's say it all together, those of you who know, a step up at the end of the round. Okay, so those are the words that I'm going to be using to describe what's happening. So let's just go ahead and get started with our beading. Round one. This is where it all starts. This is how we're going to get everything where everything else is going to build from. So I'm going to start with one Superduo. Now, the cool thing about the Superduo is I'm going to bring this guy really close to the camera. They're these funky little pinched beads. Let's go this way really quickly so you can see it from the side. And they have two holes, which makes them a really unique design element when you're doing bead stitching. And as we're doing our netted stitch, sometimes we're going to go through the top hole. Sometimes we're going to go through the bottom hole. And sometimes we are going to go through the top hole and then the bottom hole, or the bottom hole and then the top hole. So each of those holes we're going to use and we're going to fill with our thread in this project. But each time you do a round, you really are only going to be working with one side or one hole of that Superduo. Now, I always say this, you will not always see me do it, but it's good practice every time you pick up a Superduo to just double check that that second hole is not clogged. Sometimes, because of the way that these guys are manufactured, they can, the coating can get into that second hole. And if that happens, if you have one that's blocked, either set it aside or you can try with your needle to punch it through. I usually am okay with cleaning it out with my needle, just something to be aware of. So I'm going to pick up one Superduo, one size 8 seed bead, one Bugle, and you can see I'm just picking them up right off of my bead mat. I'm not picking up the beads and trying to put them onto the needle. I'm just picking them up gently right from my bead mat. So I've got one Superduo, one size 8 seed bead, one Bugle bead, one size 8 seed bead, and one Superduo, one size 8 seed bead, one Bugle bead, one size 8 seed bead. Yeah, 8 times. Okay. Just double checking to make sure, because counts change, right? So you just want to make sure that you have the right count as you're doing it. So the first round will just be one size 8, one Bugle, one size 8. So that we're going to repeat that all the way around. So I'm going to pick up another Bugle. You can see if I can both count and talk at the same time, because this row is it the most important row? It could be the most important row. And it's the row that you need to make sure is going to fit over your wine bottle neck. Okay, I am not paying close enough attention. So let's make sure that we're putting the right beads on, Meredith. Because what I have noticed in doing this project is I have down here on my workspace 3 different bottles of wine, and each bottle has a totally different sized neck. Well, that certainly makes it a little bit more challenging to make this project one size fits all, right? And something that I wasn't quite focused on when I was first writing the instructions. I wish that I had had a moment and just said, hey, all wine bottles that are in my house right now are different sizes. But we're beaders. We know how to go with the flow. We know how to adjust our counts. We know how to kind of zhuzh in another bead if we need to. So what you could do, if you needed a little bit more room, let's brainstorm together. What are some things that you could do? You could add a size 11 on either side of the Superduos, right? If we wanted to keep it all even, just a little size 11 is going to add just that little extra all the way around. You could add another bugle in here, right? Change the count completely. All you really would need to do is just kind of play around with it, right? This wine bottle here, I think it's hysterical that we're talking about wine bottles, is much, much thicker of a neck. And so I might need another whole series in here to get it right. So, but luckily it's the first step, right? So you can easily judge everything in that very first round and figure out, do I need a couple more beads? Do I need a few less beads? Do I need a whole other round? And the beauty and the brilliance of this stitch and this project is it doesn't matter what you start with, the repetition is always going to be the same. So let's see, in the instructions, I suggest doing this 8 times. Let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need to do a couple more. But that was one of the things that I noticed right off the bat as I was practicing this project and doing it in a different colorway, is depending on which wine bottle you are basing it off of, you might have to judge it a little bit. And that's okay. And it doesn't have to be a wine bottle. It could be champagne, right? Let's make it a real party. Or a sparkling cider. I tend to like a sparkling cider. I think anything that has bubbles in it makes it a party, right? Okay, so now let me count this again. Let's pay attention. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? Okay, perfect. So now I have my loop. And you want to make sure that when you're doing your loop, that when you kind of put it together, like I did it right there, that you don't have like an extra bugle in there, or an extra seed bead, or an extra Superduo. You want to make sure that indeed everything is even, and you have your Superduos and they are hugged by the size 8s and then the bugles in between. Or if you've chosen a different pattern, awesome. All right, so this fits very nicely over my wine bottle right here. Bring that into, I did not quite account for moving wine bottles in and out of frame. But let's see, just for fun, let's see if this is going to fit on my big guy. And you know what? It does. So that's great. Okay, perfect. So we are not making fine jewelry, and we've got a lot going on here, right? So if you are used to threading your thread back in rather than knotting, I would actually in this case tie a knot. You just want it to be a little bit more secure, especially because we're using a lot of beads. We are potentially transporting this. And let's face it, our husbands might be the ones pouring the wine. And are they ever the really careful ones in the relationship? No. So I think that just a good tight surgeon's knot, left over right, right over left, is a nice way to finish this off. And then we'll go ahead and tuck that end in later on. just looking through the comments here. Now, just as a reminder, I did do a very similar project to this last year as an ornament cover. And they're right over there. So maybe after, at the end of class, I'll go grab some and just show what I did last class. And you can certainly go back into the archives and search on that project. So right now, my knot is kind of right in, it's not kind of, it is exactly right in between the Superduo and the size 8 seed bead. So what I want to do is with my needle, I want to take my needle through that size 8, through the next bugle, through the next size 8, and I want to come out that same top hole of the Superduo. It just puts the thread in the right place to start the next round. Okay, and I'm going to say that in a couple of different times because that's what step up does once we get to that. Okay, so similarly, my thread isn't quite in this right place to start the next round yet because it's coming out of the bottom here, and I need to bring my needle through the top of that bead. Or if it's easier to think of, the well, we'll go with that. Okay, so we want to come out of this side of the Superduo, the one that does not have anything coming out of it. And there will be this little tiny, it's almost impossible to see, but this little tiny thread path here, which is why I'm using black thread so that you can see this. But why using a thread that more coordinates with your beads is sometimes preferable because you might not want to see this. Although, to be fair, I threaded this project with black thread and you cannot see it at all. You would never know that it's threaded with black thread. Right? Yeah, this black thread. It's like, wait a second, I can't see that it's black thread, but it is. And that's also one of the great things about WildFire is because it is so strong and so thin that it really does disappear even when you have a darker color. All right, so I'm just gonna kind of clean up my workspace just a little bit so that we can get down and dirty with it. So now my thread is coming out of the right hole of the Superduo. So now I'm ready for round 2. And round 2 is 1 size 8, 1 bugle, 1 size 8, 1 Superduo, 1 size 8, 1 bugle, 1 size 8. So we're going to do that. So 1 size 8, 1 bugle, 1 size 8. So it's the same count as the first. I just like starting by picking up a Superduo first, and on this I can't because I need it to be the size 8. Yeah, okay. So now after we do that, we are going to skip. Let me see if I can get this really nice and close. We're going to skip everything here. From this point on, we are only going to be going through the empty hole of the Superduo. So all of the other beads on the round almost don't even matter as part of the design because all we need to worry about is going through those Superduo holes, which is why doing a project like this, especially if it's the first time that you've been doing any netting, using the Superduos is actually a great idea because you don't have to wonder what the next bead to thread your needle through is. It's always going to be your Superduo. All right, so I'm going to just do that all the way around. So 1 size 8, 1 bugle, 1 size 8, 1 Superduo, 1 size 8, 1 bugle, 1 size 8, and then through the next empty hole in the round. And we are going to continue to do that all the way around. So I'm going to take it up to speed and see if I can both talk and take it up to speed. I couldn't do that in the first round, apparently. So we're going to try to do it in this one. So something to keep in mind also with the bugle beads is you want to make sure that you check each of the bugle beads for breakage. So sometimes, because if you think about it, these bugle beads are very delicate, very small, very thin pieces of glass. Sometimes they can crack and break. Usually, I would assume. Now, see here, I skipped my size 11, and I'm glad that I noticed that. So I'm just going to very carefully back this out and go back. See, I cannot apparently today. Sometimes I can talk and count and pick up beads at the same time, but apparently today is not that day. So you can see here, this little guy, this bugle bead is broken. So you would just set him aside and not use him in your design. You just want to be aware that the bugle beads can have little breaks in them. And just like, you know, this little guy right here, like they're little glass beads. So sometimes you'll just have to cull them, is the kind of the industry way of saying it, and set them aside. Don't use them in your project. Maybe you use them for a mosaic, or you use them for something that doesn't involve precision, but definitely something to be aware of. And again, you can see I'm just picking these beads up. I'm not putting them in my hand. I'm able to keep the beadwork in my hand here as I am adding the beads to my needle. And because this needle is nice and long, I can get them all on the needle all at the same time. And the fun, I love watching this stitch come together, because it always makes an interesting shape at each stage of the game. So whether I am on my second round or on my fourth round, after the fourth round, it kind of all comes down. But here, beautiful star shape, right? And the beginning of the top of a Christmas ornament as well. So again, super versatile stitch. Just depends on where you go with it and what you want to make it into. Holiday ornament, definitely. Trying to think what else you could cover with this. So many different things. Okay, so here is where we get to the step up, and I'm coming all the way up to the camera so you can see what I'm talking about. So I've done all of my points, right? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm on my 8th point. Okay. And when I get to my 8th point, things can get a little confusing. This Superduo right here is the one that I pointed out that has that little thread path through it, right? None of the other Superduos will have that little thread path. That's how I know that I'm back to the beginning and I have to do the step up. So your initial inclination might be to get confused, but your initial inclination should be to do exactly as you've done the entire rest of the time, which is to go through that top hole of the bead, of the Superduo bead. But you also need to go through that size 8, the bugle, the size 8, and then that first Superduo that you added. Okay, so all I've done is I've done that all in one thread path, or one pass, I should say. So through the top of that Superduo, the 8, the bugle, the 8, and then the other Superduo. And then I'm going to put it down, admire my beautiful shape, my beautiful octagon star, and breathe a sigh of relief because I have done my first round. I think that it's always a good idea when you've had a great success, like doing your first step up, to take a break. Take a cup of coffee, reset. Because we have to remember that we're not quite done getting our thread in the right place for the next round. because my thread is now coming out of the bottom of this bead, right? And it needs to be coming out the top. So see what I did there? My thread is coming out of the bottom, and I'm going to go back through the top this way. And now what you have is that same little hook, thread path that we had before, but now we are going around the opposite way. Or we can flip it over and continue the same way. Sometimes I do it one way, I do it the other way, but always you want to make sure that you're working in the way that your thread is facing. So, that was a lot for round 1 and round 2, but the good news is all you have to learn now is round 3, because round 3 we do for the whole rest of the piece. So let's go ahead and do round 3, and then we are going to get to some fringe. All right, so now round 3, we're going to make our piece just a little bit bigger. So we're going to add 1 size 8, like we always start with, 1 bugle, 1 size 8. But this time we're going to add another bugle and another size 8 before we get to our Superduo. And we're going to repeat that again. So 111, 1 bugle, 1 size 8, 1 bugle, 1 size 8, 1 bugle. Okay, so this is our pattern now from now until the end. Oops, forgot my last size 8. Okay, so this is our pattern from now until the end. 8 bugle, 8 bugle, 8, Superduo, 8 bugle, 8 bugle, 8. Boom. That's all you need to know for the entire rest of this piece. So just like we did on that other round, really the only place that my needle can go is through the hole on the bottom of the Superduo, or the top of the Superduo. It kind of depends on how you're looking at it. Okay, and so you just want to make sure that everything comes through, everything looks right, and we are good to go. So we're going to continue that around. We're going to do 8 bugle, 8 bugle, 8 Superduo. And you can see how adding these units increases the length, or increases the diameter, radius, circumference of the circle. And you can see how it starts building on itself. Now, this is generally about when I will start working on my bottle. So I'm going to put this over the top, move it down. Watch my fingers in the way. Sorry, friends. I'm going to see if I can get a nice angle on this so you can see what I'm doing. So now I'm working on the bottle. Okay, I just put everything over the top because I think that it's easier to build this way. You might disagree. You might think that it's much easier to build it off of the wine bottle, and that's okay too. You can still pour the wine bottle while you're doing it like this. So definitely it will work whichever way you want to do it. And I'm going to bring this, let me try to get just a little bit of a different angle here. I think that's going to be a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to do the exact same thing as I did before. I'm going to pick up that size 8, because now this frees up both of my hands to be able to work. So I don't kind of have to worry about keeping this in, keeping it straight, keeping it untangled, keeping it unruly, keeping it ruly. It makes it easier, and also makes it easier if I needed to step away for a minute. Like I mentioned in the very beginning of our class today, this is a more than one sitting project. So working on the wine bottle like this just makes it a little bit easier to keep everything all even. It also makes it easier to see, do I need to adjust anything? Do I need to judge anything? Do I like how my colors are looking? This is how I do it. That's all there is to it. So it might work for you better as well. All right, so I'm going to do this one round. And then we are going to start working on Fringe. And one of the other things that I really like about this project is once you have mastered this repetitive technique, or talking, there's so many different iterations, so many different variations, so many different ways that you can use this stitch for so many different projects. So I was glad that it all came together. That's what I'm trying to say. And not only that, the fringe part of this project also just by itself is a really fun technique. So adding the fringe to the netting is great and super fun and beautiful, but having fringe earrings or adding fringe to a brick stitch, we've done that in class before. Adding fringe to make a tassel. So all of these different building blocks that we learn by taking all of these different classes, or by hanging out with me once every couple of weeks, can all be combined together in all different ways. And when I was out with Finn, the dog, before class today, and I was kind of thinking over what some of the things that I wanted to talk about, some of the things I wanted to remember to point out in class today. And one of the things that I was thinking is, once you learn kind of the basic, half dozen bead weaving stitches, and you really master the philosophy, for lack of a better word, behind each of them, the world just opens up in terms of what you can make, because all you need to do is combine them in different ways, use different sizes of beads. It's really fun once you have all of those stitches in your toolkit, when you can start playing around with them and just experimenting with different counts. Those of you who watch a lot of my classes and follow along with me, that I love to wonder, what if instead of using size 8s, I use size 6s? What if instead of bugles, we used, gosh, what could we use instead of bugles? Tila beads. I don't know. What if instead of a Superduo, we used a Tila bead? That would be really fun. I have not made this project with a Tila bead yet. Oh, when I did do this stitch though, if you didn't, one of my favorite classes that I have done for the Michael's Community Classroom is the netted Easter egg that I did last spring. Definitely check that one out. That's a really fun one. Again, totally the same technique. Now I'm back around to the beginning, and let me just move this just a little bit more, maybe. Let's see if that's a good angle. So I need to do that step up, right? Or in this case, it's kind of a step down, but we're still going to call it a step up, because I'm on my last point, or my last diamond, or finishing the diamond here. So I need to go through the bottom of this Superduo here, and we're going to try, not sure if I'm going to be able to do it all in one pass, but I need to also go through that size 8 bugle, size 8 bugle, size 8, and through down to that Superduo. So can she do it in one pass? I think she can, maybe. Another advantage of using this nice long needle is that I can do that all in one pass. Yep, perfect. Okay, just took a little zhuzhing. So again, this is that last Superduo on the bottom, but I need to step up to get my needle back in place for the next round. Now you can see things are, I don't know if you can really tell, but things are a little zhuzhy here, a little warbly, a little not quite lying right. But the beauty of this project is that once you get down here and you add all of this netting, everything comes down and relaxes and comes into place. So until I got to about here and started adding the netting, this was all kind of crinkly and not quite laying right. But once I got that fringe on, everything draped down really, really nicely. So what I want to do is I want to move into frame this one that I've done. So I did that round 3, and I also did a round 4, and I did a round 5 here. And so what I would keep doing in order to get my whole wine bottle done, or you could just do a little bit, right? You don't have to do the whole thing if you're like, oh, this is so tedious, I've had it. You could stop right here, right? And that's what we're going to do. And so you can kind of see, maybe I like how that looks. I don't know. But what I wanted to show is adding thread, right? Adding thread, I feel like can be challenging. It's one of my least favorite things to do. I don't know about you all, but if I can get away with a project without having to add thread, I mean, I know I talk a big game, like you should use a reasonable, comfortable amount of thread. But if I can do a project with 5 feet, I'm super happy about that. But it's a necessary thing to do. So I'm just pulling out from my spool right here, another wingspan's worth. And one of the things that I also wanted to make sure that I showed, and I glossed over this in the very beginning, when you cut WildFire, you want to use a really sharp pair of scissors, and you want to hold that WildFire all the way back in the jaw and almost pull the WildFire as you're cutting, because this material is so strong, and because of the way it's manufactured with that bonded coating and the braid inside, it can tend to get chopped up if you don't cut it that way. And then of course I smushed the front down just so that I could get it into that needle really well. The other thing that I like about the Jewel Loom needles is they seem to have a little bit of a bigger eye than both the size 10 and size 12 hard needles. So they are a little bit easier to thread is what I'm trying to say. So all I'm going to do here to add my thread is coming out from right here. So let me just see, where is my thread coming out from? Okay, so my thread is coming out from here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to enter back here, or I'm going to enter here. I think I'm going to enter here. You just want to come back far enough so that it gives the thread a little bit of purchase, a little bit of friction, a little bit to hold on to. And then what I'll end up doing, and sometimes what ends up happening is you need to have a little bit more oomph to get your needle through your beads. All you do in that case is take your flat nose pliers and pull the needle through with it. Little tip. Okay, so I'm adding thread, and sometimes, especially when you are adding a lot of thread, it can get a little tangly. But what I'll do is I'll add the thread here, and I'll generally tie this in a little overhand knot just to keep it in place while I'm working. I like to go back and weave all of my tails in at the end, but you might be a weaver tail inner as you go along. This is always a little fiddly, but you just kind of want your thread not to come undone as you're working. Okay, so this is perhaps a little bit longer of a tail, but I want to start my fringe fresh. Okay, so when you get to where you're ready to start adding your fringe, just start your fringe fresh. Start with a fresh thread. It'll just make oh my goodness, it will make your life easier. Okay. So and again, I'm just noting some notes that I wrote. You will need to add a couple of threads as you're doing your fringe. So just be prepared. That's all it's going to happen. Okay. So now what you want to do is make sure that your thread is exiting from the top and or bottom, depending on how you look at it, hole of the Superduo. We need to get much closer to the work. There we go. Okay. Wait a second for that to come into focus. It will. So we have our Superduo threads coming out of that one side. We need it to come out of the other side. And this is another spot where you have so much freedom, right? Your fringe could look like my fringe, but it doesn't have to. I want to bring the fringe in without actually moving anything else, right? So your fringe could look totally different. This is my suggested fringe. So what I did is I picked up 3 of the size 8s, 1, 2, 3 size 8s. Excuse me. And I do need to get out my little beads now. And I'm just going to pull, I have 2 sizes here. I have a 6mm size and a 4mm size. And actually I do have those 10mm someplace, right? Here they are. We'll do the 10mm also. And again, totally up to how your eye wants to do your fringe. This is how I did it. Okay, so I've got 3 size 8s. We're gonna do 1 bugle, 1 size 8. One bugle, 1 size 8, and I might tend to start kind of going rogue here, but I'm going to add my 4mm here. How about I come into frame and show you that I'm adding my 4mm. Sorry, friends, I forgot that I was so close up. You can actually see what I'm picking up down here. Let's reframe that real quick. It's tough to get both really close and also show you what I'm doing at the same time. And this again is why I think working from the bottle, for me, I find it easier. For you, you might not find it easier. You might find it easier just to lay it on your workspace. All right, so we're gonna go here and another bugle and one of these, and now I'm gonna go a little bit bigger. These are the 6mm. I like patterns and keeping that repetition of those size 8s on either side with the bugles in between. You might find a different pattern is more pleasing to your eye, and I definitely encourage that. I just find doing this with seed beads is I don't know, I love working with seed beads, so it's kind of the perfect project for that for me. Okay, and then you always want to make sure, especially if you're going rogue, because you're like, oh, I don't want to follow the instructions. And I wrote the instructions, but I don't want to follow the instructions. Go figure. So I have 1, 2 here, 1, 2 here. I'm going to do 1, 2 here. And then I have my 4mm bead, my 6mm bead. And now I'm going to go big or go home with this great big 10mm bead. And now what I'm going to do is on the bottom, I'm going to make a picot of 3 size 8. So 1, 2, 3 size 8s. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to skip over those 3 size 8s. And with my needle, I'm going to go back through all of these beads until I get to right here. Because what I want to do is I want my needle to be coming out of this top bugle bead. So you can see clearly why having this nice long needle really makes a big difference, because I think I can do this all in one pass, right? Which is nice. So I'm going to come back through this bottom bead here. I'm going to try so hard to do this all in one pass. And if I can't, that's okay too. Don't beat yourself up if for whatever reason it's just not working. Sometimes it does. Sometimes they go back really well. Sometimes not. But keep in mind, this is why we use WildFire and why we use the sizes of seed beads that we use, why we use a nice thin needle. And okay, so here I am at the top again. My needle is just coming right here. And maybe I'm feeling a little fiddly. Just want to come in here with my pliers and pull that up. Okay. And now this is when, I'm so sorry, I'm like trying to make sure you can see nice and close up, but also I need two hands. Okay, so see how things have gotten a little jumbly, a little potentially tangled. They're not actually tangled here. Just need to kind of take it easy and pull everything nice and tight from where those 3 seed beads are at the bottom. And you might need to zhuzh those 3 seed beads just a little bit and pull them nice and tight at the bottom. And so now we have a really nice fringe, but we're not quite finished yet because we have these 3 beads here at the top. We need to mirror those 3 beads by picking up 1, 2, 3 beads. And then we want to go back through that bottom hole of the Superduo. So really all we're doing is making kind of a great big circle, great big figure 8. My thread is coming out of that Superduo. It's going down through my fringe around the bottom picot, all the way back up again, adding 3 more beads back through that Superduo. And again, if you want to do this top part differently, awesome. Do it differently. No problem. Make a little flower in here even. That would be really fun. Do that for my next project. So now I need to get my needle or my needle and my thread from where it is here to the next fringe or the next drop part to do my next fringe. So you got to look and see, how do you want your thread to go? First things first, it needs to go back through the top of that Superduo. Then it needs to go all the way back through everything. So sometimes you can do it all in one pass. Sometimes you want to do it a little bit slower. So let's go ahead and pull that through. Sometimes your tails are going to get in the way. Just kind of move them out of the way. Sometimes things get messed up. That's why it's always a good idea to have an awl on hand, because you can use that to move threads where you want them to go and say, what is going on here? This little guy is tangled up somehow. I'm not quite sure how he got tangled up, but without kind of having to go in fiddly with your nails or fiddly with your fingers, you can kind of figure out, see, gosh, what in the world happened here? What needs to be tightened up? Something needs to be tightened up. This is where it helps to have really good lighting and just take your time. Sometimes you need to back things out. Maybe this whole thing needs to be backed out. Something went a little bit awry where my thread is looped right here. I'm not 100% sure what happened, but what I'm going to do in the interest of time is, instead of figuring all that out, just know that with an awl and a little bit of patience, you'll be able to work that out, no problem. Because I didn't knot it or anything. It's just looped up a little bit. But I want to show everybody that we're going to come all the way through these beads. We're going to come up here. Oops. And actually, I mentioned this one, but we forgot about this little friend. And sometimes I'll do that. I'll forget about the top one. And you don't have to do a fringe on each and every Superduo, right? We could skip this one and just do fringe here on the long ones. But on my example, just move this back in really quickly, I did fringe on all of them. Okay, so you can see what it looks like with all of that fringe. But let's play what if. Let's just go through, and instead of doing the fringe on this one, let's keep going. Make our lives a little bit easier, right? A little faster of a project. Come back through here and all the way down. So instead of doing 12 fringe, we're 16 fringe. right? Because we have 8 on the top. So instead of doing 16 fringe, we're just going to do 8. So once again, with Superduos, you have to be attentive to where that thread is coming out of. So it's coming out of that top of the Superduo. So before we do any fringe, and I've definitely made this omission, we want to make sure that we're coming out from the bottom, because otherwise it's not going to hang right? It's going to hang from the top and it's going to be a little wonky. So let's go ahead and do one more fringe before we finish this party. So let's do, oh, we were doing them with silver, right? So we're going to do 1. I love that Finn knows that it's coming up to be the end of class, because he is moving out from underneath the desk. It's like, it's almost 3 o'clock, Meredith, or Mama, I should say. It's time to finish up. Excuse me. Time to finish up and come back to giving me attention, right? He's a smart pupper. All right, so I have those 3, 1, 1, 1. Okay. And at this point, all I do is I just look and see what I've done before, and mimic that. For me, find it much easier to work against an already made piece rather than read the instructions, especially for something like this. I was getting all tangled up in my own instructions this morning, trying to figure out the counts. And I wrote them correctly, but for whatever reason, I kept seeing one more bugle bead. And I was like, that is not right. I don't understand what is going on. So for me, especially after I've done this a couple times, I just like to line up and see what I'm doing against what I've already done. So now it's time for this. And maybe you don't want quite as big of a bead here, or maybe you do a drop bead or a crystal bead, or gosh, there's so many different possibilities, so many different variations. And those are my favorite projects to make for sure. Are the ones that have so many different variations to them. So as I am finishing up, I will ask, of course, if you do make this project, please go ahead and post it on your socials and tag Beadalon, because I love seeing what people have made. Also tag Make It with Michael's and Michael's Classroom, so that the friends at Michael's can also see what everybody has made. You can join me for my Michael's classes on most every other Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And Sarah Lovecraft also teaches for Beadalon, and she has just such an amazing design aesthetic and a wonderful teaching style. So once again, I've cut out just from the top of that bugle bead. So don't be tempted to go through those 3 all the way to the top, or you could just have the drop like that. Again, so many different variations, but I added the 3 more bugle beads and came around just to make a little loop over top. And you can see this loop came in much, much better than the other one did. So now I have my loop at the top. I always like to double check and make sure things are tight, not too tight, because even though our fringes are now going to pull our netting down, this is about where the weight is going to be now. So you don't want this to be too tight, or else it's going to be a little wonky. So back through the top here, up through that top of that Superduo, through the bugle, through everything, up to the top of that Superduo, and back down. And it's funny when, oh, I pulled my needle right out of that thread, or I pulled that thread right out of that needle. Oh my goodness. So we get to show threading the needle one last time. Where did it go? And that is what happens if you don't pay attention to what you're doing. So let's go ahead and just re-thread that needle. Oops. bear with me for 1 second, friends. I too sometimes struggle with threading needles. And if this happens to you, a good way to fix this problem is to go ahead and do a fresh cut. So sometimes if you really are struggling with threading a needle, do a fresh cut and come back through here and thread it on again. Just sometimes you need to. All right, so let's try that one last time. We're gonna come through here, come through all of this, up to the top. There we go. Make sure everything is tight, but not too tight. And then come back down. I kind of am digging this design a little bit less. Sometimes more is more, but sometimes, not often, but sometimes less can be more too, especially if you want to make a bunch of these for different hostess presents. Hopefully we're going to be in a situation that we can have some safe, hopefully distanced, but also fun holiday gatherings. And this is a perfect hostess gift. It just is something a little bit extra, especially for the person who has it all. I have a lot of friends that it's really difficult to do things for, or to buy things for, or to bring something as a hostess gift. And so this is a really nice, very unique way of saying thank you for being a friend. Thank you for having me at your fete. And hopefully it will be well received. So just really quickly, one last thing before we wrap it up. To finish this off, all you would need to do is just go right back through another one here, probably another one here, and then just tie a knot. And then once you have tied that knot, and I'm going to go back to my knot here, use your cord cutter and just trim and seal that end right there. And then it will disappear into the bead, and no one will ever know how many times you needed to add thread to your project. All right, so that is the class for today. I know it was a lot. I did say in the beginning we were going to have to do a little bit of a cooking show style because it's a long project. But the good thing is it is a repetitive project. So once you get that thread path, once you get the step up and the coming back through the Superduo to reposition your thread for the next round, you're golden. And you can do as many of those row threes or as few of those row threes as you want. So thanks as always to everybody for hanging out with me for a little over an hour today, but I very much appreciate it. I hope you like this project, and be sure to follow Beadalon, do a hashtag for Beadalon on your socials when you post for this project. And you can always find me at Meredith Joy Designs. And if you have any questions about this particular project, I know it's a little disjointed sometimes when you don't see a project start to finish. So feel free to shoot me off a message and I'll do what I can to help you out. So again, thanks so much. Thanks to Yvette for being in the chat and answering all of those questions. Thanks, of course, to Felicia for being a wonderful moderator. And until next time, happy beading.